Welcome, everyone. And my name is Megan Grace, and this is Bronwyn Simmons. And I have had the just extreme pleasure of knowing Bronwyn for just even under a year, but I've been following her much longer than that. I was originally introduced to Bronwyn and her work through Susan Smedley-Gerber, who is a Madisonian and a mutual friend. Maybe Bronwyn can talk about her roots a little bit to Madison. But Bronwyn is an astrologer and a psychic and has been practicing for 25 plus years. And she hails from Vancouver Island. We've been connecting this way through Zoom. And this is, I think, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but Bronwyn's main way of connecting with her clients and with her audiences, because she does lots and lots of one-on work and then work with groups around the world, actually. So I'm just so excited. We've been talking about doing this for a long time. And before the arrival of COVID, Bronwyn was actually supposed to be here. I think it was just this last weekend or something. Yeah. She was going to do a weekend long retreat, and that will absolutely be in the cards in our future. Maybe you can tell us better. You can consult the stars and tell us when that's possible. But anyways, just welcome, Bronwyn, and I would love to hear, you know, just a little bit about how it feels for you to be connecting with your sisters and brothers back here in Madison.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Thank you so much for the warm welcome, Megan. I am really delighted to be here, and it does connect me back to my roots. I went to college in Madison in the early 80s, if you can believe that.
Yeah.
Astrologically, it's interesting because we're having a repetition right now in 2020 of some of the really big transits of 1982. So it's interesting to me on a personal level that during this year of repetition, I'm reconnecting with some of my dear friends and some of the community there in Madison. And if any of you were around at that time, and maybe you went to a psychic fair, you might have even had a reading with me, because I was a young woman practicing my craft, and I was out there then. So it's really a delight to revisit this. And Susan and I were friends back then and have stayed in touch over the years, and she has been such a positive influence in my life. She's such an amazing, powerful woman. So
absolutely.
I love the connections that I make through her. Yeah.
How did you get connected, or what was your foray into astrology? How did that come about for you?
So I've always been drawn to working with the energetic realms in one way or another since I was a child. And my mother gave me my first pack of tarot cards when I was 4 years old, and I had my first astrology reading. I know, right? I had my first astrology reading when I was in my teens, and I think many astrologers share this this experience of having that first consultation with an astrologer and just being smitten, being amazed that somebody who has never met you can tell you really profound things about your own life and the cycles of your life, and can do some forecasting and can see into not just your future. It isn't really about that. It's not fortune telling in that sense, but it's a deep kind of connection to the soul's purpose that was really awe-inspiring to me the first time I met a practitioner of this art. So I actually took my first astrology classes in Madison. Wow. And practiced tarot and astrology in my 20s. Had my daughter, got into a more conventional career for a number of years, a number of decades actually. And over the last 8 years have reconnected with those mystical roots and reestablished now thriving practice as an astrologer. So it's been a long road, and it's really cool that the roots of that are in Madison.
It's awesome. I was telling you on another occasion that for me, yoga and Ayurveda and astrology are kind of like the three legs of this stool that have been fascinating for me, to me, for a really long time. And yoga and Ayurveda are the ones I'm more familiar with, but astrology is, it's very much of interest to me personally, and also something that I want to bring more and more of to the Perennial yoga community. And why I, really what Perennial is all about is, you know, and all spiritual practices for that matter are about, is this based on this dictum of know thyself,
Yes.
you know? And Ayurveda tells us that, you know, all of us and everything is made up of the same 5 elements, you know? And then yoga is all about the union or the connection of all things to one another, and how we have this relationship and this web that brings us all together. And you know, we really can't know ourselves without knowing the other, and exploring that connection to all things. And then along comes astrology, and, you know, what this kind of fills out the picture for me is this idea that, you know, we are all energy, as is everything in the universe, and that the way that the universe was energetically kind of aligned at the moment that we chose to come into this existence kind of brings with it, it kind of unfolds a story for us that we can look at and understand from where we came, will give us some, you know, really helpful guided information or wisdom about where we're going. And what I have loved about working with you is because what you have helped me understand is that there is a real personal story in there based on the exact time that I was born and the place I was born and so on and so forth. But there's also the broader story that is, that my story is kind of woven into, you know, and to kind of go back and forth or kind of mix those and see how they're layered together is, it's fascinating. I can't stop using that word when it comes to astrology, but it's, it's so helpful. And I want to say, especially right now, when it seems like there is so much uncertainty, like most of us, I think, would say we don't know how to ground where we are right now, personally or collectively. And I was hoping that before we move into talking about May and the new moon activation, if you would help us kind of frame that, like what is going on?
Okay.
In, you know, just like 3 minutes.
Yeah. So first of all, I just want to, I want to thank you for that beautiful explanation of how and why astrology works, because this is exactly the philosophy that I'm coming from as an astrologer, that the reason this sacred science is able to serve us is because it shows, it highlights our interconnection with all energies and with the great energetic cycles that are surrounding us. We're not separate from that. We belong to it. And that is why we can see our soul reflected in the living sky. Not because the planets are beaming something down at us and causing things, but because we are one with those energies. So what shows within us shows outside of us. And one of the beauties of astrology, and I love that you keep using the word fascinating. One of the beauties of astrology is the great simplicity, yes, but also the complexity that allows us to dial in so closely on one person's life, but also on the great currents that are affecting all of us. So 2020 is a year that astrologers have been looking toward for a long time. There's a great 40-year cycle among some of our outer planets, which if we think about go back to grade school and think about what we learned about how the solar system is built, and how some of the planets are close to the sun, and there are neighbors, and those we call the personal planets. They move more quickly. We have a more intimate relationship in our charts with those energies. And then the further out we go from the sun, the more we come into these big archetypes that are almost too big for our human hearts and minds to take in. And they are the great spiritual teachers in the chart and in the living sky. One of them is Saturn, who brings structure and limits and talks about our relationship to authority. In ancient times, he was the outermost planet that we could see. So the ancients thought of him as the outer limit of the solar system, and he contains all of those. I use he, but it's he, she. These archetypes transcend gender. He contains that outer limit. So if we think about how limitation is something that can feel really uncomfortable, but it's necessary for manifestation. So it's manifestation, crystallization, and structure. And so we have that energy operating in our lives all the time and in the sky. And every 40 or so years, that great teacher Saturn meets up with Pluto, who is now the outermost planet in the solar system from what our human technology can allow us to see. And he holds the deep unconscious and the shadow realms. So everything that we're afraid of, the unconscious contents that we don't want to look at. Think of all the myths and stories you've heard of the underworld. Pluto in Roman mythology is the king of the underworld. So just put those two ideas together. We have the guru who teaches us about structure and authority and inner authority and manifestation, meeting up with the shadow self, and the darkness of the underworld, which we don't call this stuff good or bad, right? The darkness of the underworld is our fears, but it's also the vein of gold that runs through the shadows that we need to excavate when we're doing work on ourselves. So this is reflected in our personal experiences this year, where we're all restructuring our lives and being called to face our fears. It's also reflected in the collective in the same thing, right? We're being asked to restructure our relationship with authority. The structures are breaking down in that shadowy way in order to be rebuilt. So as I said, as astrologers, we've been looking towards this for years. Of course, we can't know. This is the thing. It's just like meteorology, right? You can say, well, hurricane season is going to be bad this year, but you can't say on X date, this hurricane is going to hit this city. Astrology is the same way. We can look at those big patterns of energy, and we can say, and have been saying, 2020 is going to be a big transformative year. Our outer structures of nation and government are going to go through a big transformation. We personally will go through a big transformation. It's going to be difficult and shadowy, but there's light at the end of the tunnel. So we've been saying that. And those who have been listening to us have gotten that. We spent a lot of 2019 going, okay, what's going to happen? And my approach is always to look for those veins of gold. I do not like to talk fear to people. I don't believe that we're given anything that we can't handle, and that's not to be blasé. That is not to say that there are not human stories that are terrible and dark. I'm not bypassing or denying any of that. I am interested in empowering each one of us in the present moment to know ourselves deeply enough to be able to walk with courage through the shadows that we need to face. So when I look into a year like 2020, I see shadow and grief and fear and strange new structural challenges. But also I see that personally, if we do our Saturn work of growing ourselves up, facing responsibility, revising our relationship with inner authority. Inner authority is first before we start examining our relationship to outer authority. If we do all that work, it's not that it will protect us or we'll be safe, but it will allow us to find those veins of gold. So yes, a very challenging year. And because I've just talked about those huge challenges, let me say that one of the beauties of astrology is we can do a little bit of forecasting. And I can say that by fall and early winter, we really will be emerging into a new light, which isn't going to be like, ta-da. This is real life, and we have to work slowly, and especially with Saturn, we work slowly, and we have to deal with our structures. But if we engage in our work with faith and courage, what 2021 will bring is new possibilities on a social scale, on a personal scale, true new possibilities at a much broader horizon. We're in Capricorn energy right now, which is like climbing the rock face. If you've ever known somebody who's a free climber or watched one of those amazing documentaries about the art of free climbing, where people just cling to cliffs. And that's what we're all doing right now, is we're so focused on holding onto the cliff and just putting one hand in front of the other, climbing. We can only see what's right in front of us. And I've heard this from so many people. People who are normally visionaries and can see way ahead are saying to me, I can only see what's right here, because we're only meant to see that right now. Climbing, and that's 2020. We're going to be climbing that rock face, and it takes all we've got. Then we emerge into Aquarius territory, which is analogous to summiting that cliff, and you're exhausted, and it's taken everything that you had to make that climb, and your fingertips are bruised, your knees are bruised, but suddenly there's big intake of breath, and you're looking at imagine that dizzying effect of looking out at that horizon when your face has been this close to the rock face. So this is the flow of energies for 2020, 2021. And yes, we are engaged in that work, and we wish we were closer to that peak at this point, but we all have our individual work and our collective work to do that requires engagement, maturity, discernment, all of those beautiful Saturnian qualities, and also time. But there is light and new horizon ahead that we can't see yet, but it's there. I promise you it's there. We're getting through this time, and there is a soul purpose to it. And again, I don't mean that in a light or bypassing way. Soul purpose can be the hardest thing you've ever done. And the grief and losses and difficulties are real, but the veins of gold that we find are real as well. And the strength that we gain in that climb is real. So yeah, 2020, we've been getting ready for a ride.
Yeah. Just before this, I was on another Zoom call with 8 other women entrepreneurs, and just everything you're saying right now is we were kind of reflecting in our own experience of like how much similarity we're experiencing. And yet what I'm hearing from you is that, yeah, we're always in a place where the universe is being our teacher. Yes. And there's a shared teaching that's happening right now through the, would you call it the conjoining of Pluto and Saturn, but then there is also this wisdom that, an astrologer could help me or another person versus another person identify the unique, teaching as it kind of sits next to the bigger teaching, right? Or the global teaching.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a global teaching and a personal teaching.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. So if we shift now to so then we can understand astrology kind of gives us this, I like to call it womb to tomb kind of understanding. Yeah. And then we can break it down into, okay, this is what this period of your life is going to bring, and then we can take that down to the month, and and then even and so that kind of brings us into this conversation about the cycles of the moon, and that you talk about, you call them 4 lunar keys. Can you say a little bit about that?
Yeah, I would love to, because Lunar Work is one of my favorites, and there's a reason we call the moon our mother, right? We were talking just now about these huge planetary cycles, these big teachers that are almost too big for us to take in, these big forces that move through us. The role of the moon in astrology, just like the role of the mother to the infant, is to help us to assimilate. She holds all the light from the sun, and she's not just reflecting sunlight onto us, she's reflecting all of the planetary lights. It's called translation of light. And it literally is that. This is the energetic role that she plays. She takes these big energies and brings them to us in a way that we can assimilate in our daily life.
I love that.
Yeah. So the moon moves through her moods really quickly. She's obviously the fastest cycling of our lights in the sky. She moves through the whole zodiac in 1 month, and she moves through all her phases in 29 days. So it's a human scale of cosmic movement. And by connecting with the lunar cycles, especially if you're just embarking on your study of this amazing sacred art of astrology, there's no better place to begin than by thoroughly assimilating the lunar cycles. And if you start to work with the phases and then the signs of the moon over a period of time, it will gradually teach you everything you need to know about all of the planetary cycles, all of those relationships. So I really encourage everyone to begin to develop, if you're interested in astrology, just if you're interested in personal growth, to begin to follow the moon and begin to see how her moods and her movement and her growth and release match our own over the course of months and years. So to bring it back to the lunar keys, as you were explaining my work, Megan, yes, I do like to really bring this home and make it practical and workable for people. So it's beautiful, energetic, sacred work, but it's also something you can bring right home to your life. So the 4 lunar keys are questions for reflection that I offer you for each of the 4 major phases of the moon. And I would encourage everyone to take time. It's once a week, right? The moon is new, then she enters her first quarter, then she becomes full, then she enters her last quarter, and then she releases into new again. All of that happens over 29 days. So about once every 7 days, we have a moment to pause and reflect on that developmental journey and cycle of the moon, from in-breath to out-breath, and the little pauses at the top and bottom. This is a beautiful analogy for those of you that are students of yoga. And you know that manifesting and bringing in of energy with the in-breath, it's like the waxing moon. We're taking it in, our light is growing. And we pause at the top, we're so full, like the full moon, and we just pause there for a moment and then release the breath. And sometimes that release, as you know, as yogis, sometimes that release is the most challenging part, and that's true with the lunar cycle too. And holding at the bottom, which is where we are with the new moon, as you're hearing this, holding at the bottom is a little more challenging to hold in emptiness, right? So it cycles from fullness to emptiness, filling up with light, releasing. At the new moon, we ask, what is being conceived? So I like to offer that. We do our new moon, manifestation, we do our new moon goal setting, sure. That's great, and I do it too. But it's also important to pause at that moment of new beginning each month and ask, what is the universe intending for me? What's beginning in my life that I might not be fully aware of yet? What are the little glimmers that I'm getting from the deep mystery? So what is being conceived? This is the key to the new moon.
Can you say a little bit more? I've heard you talk about this a couple times now, and it seems like for you, there's a difference between this idea of conceiving energy and goal setting.
Yeah.
And for someone who likes the softer idea of conceiving, and feeling like you're kind of feeling into what's meant for you versus, okay, I'm getting out a sheet of paper and I'm writing down, my goals and checking those, feeling like I have to set benchmarks and checking those off. They're very different. They hold a different place or have a different sense to them. And are you saying the new moon is about both of those, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So if we think about yin and yang, solar consciousness and lunar consciousness, they're both equally important. The balance between those is important for us moving forward in our lives. And new beginnings contain both of those energies. And I love the word conceived, because if you have had the experience in life of conceiving a child or conceiving anything creatively, conceiving a business idea, conceiving a work of art, there's a moment that happens in lunar yin consciousness before we start to bring it out into ego, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's the moment before the planning where whatever it is takes root in your being. It's subtle, right? Because in our culture, we really focus on that solar consciousness and that yang, that ego drive. And I'm not diminishing that. This is great. It's necessary for our survival. And I set very strong goals on the new moon. But I always honor before that the yin of it, which is really what moon energy is all about. And if we just take as an analogy, whatever gender you are, whether or not you've conceived an actual child, you've conceived something in your life. So bear with me through this analogy of conceiving a child. When we conceive, often we don't know that we've conceived. Mm-hmm. Even if it's planned, we don't know. And then later on, after we do know, we still don't know who we've conceived. Mm-hmm. And all ideas are like that. They come to us and they begin to grow in us before we know that we've conceived them. Mm-hmm. Then even after we know we conceive them, we don't know who they are. All ideas, all things that we begin. And the new moon, and when she's completely dark, is really holding that piece of yin consciousness, that generative power of yin to begin things in our lives. Because our ego isn't the only thing that begins things for us, right? We're interconnected with all of this. Things begin for us. So it's so important when we begin anything to honor both sides of that. What is being begun for me? And what do I intend to begin? Then when we get both of those working together, that's the magic, right? That's when we really can manifest and grow things in our life, when ego is doing the job in service to what the universe wants for us.
Yeah, I love that. The idea of like that, you're kind of honoring that there's a mystery that's kind of coming forward, or like, coming up out of, not darkness in a negative sense, but in a, you have to be you have to be quieter and more open and more receptive in order to receive that, rather than the real strident goal setting form of getting there. So,
and they both have their place. They both have their place. And I'll give you a tip for working strategically with the moon. There's a moment when the moon moves into newness. There's a moment, there's a second. It's very specific in time. And if we're working with the moon and setting intentions and working with this lunar key of what is being conceived, it's first of all really important that we wait for that moment of the new moon. Otherwise, we're putting all our beginnings into the ending, and we don't want to do that.
Okay.
But then the moon is actually new. We consider her technically to be in her new phase for about 2.5 days. So during that 2.5 days, she's gaining light. So if you're working at a time wanting to really sink into that, what does the universe intend for me? I have no idea what I need right now, which is a lot of where many of us are right now. Mm-hmm. Then we want to do our lunar work really close to that moment of becoming new, when she's still really dark and so much is hidden. If you're kind of like, okay, universe, I've got this. I really want to just like do X, Y, and Z and check it off the list this month, then wait a little longer, maybe wait even as much as 2 days until she's taken a little light, until you can walk out in the evening and see that glowing crescent. Mm-hmm. Make sure she's still in her new phase, so 2.5 days, no more than that. But you can use that light, go with that, the slipstream of that light. Use the darkness if you really are, I'm open. And if you have your list and you really want to go, then use a little bit of light that she's taken on. So you can dial it in. But I think, the reality of our lives, and what I would really encourage everybody to do as they begin their lunar practice, is just choose a time that feels good and convenient for you, anytime during that 2.5 days. Create some ritual space and really sit with that question, what is being conceived? And then once you've done that, then definitely make your list of, maybe 3 really important goals. And then you've done both. You've satisfied the deep unconscious energetic self, and you've satisfied the ego self who strives to create.
Yeah.
And then you're making sure those two are in alignment. So
May 22nd?
May 22nd is the next new moon at 10:38 a.m. Pacific time. So for you guys, 12:38 p.m.
Okay.
That's the moment of newness that I was just talking about. So don't get up in the morning of May 22nd and do your new moon ritual. The moon is still balsamic. She's still dying away. Okay. You want to wait until 12:38 p.m. for you guys in the central time zone, and anytime after that for about 2.5 days. Okay. So,
and then this new moon, each new monthly new moon is connected to a particular planet. That's right. So like you.
Yes. So yes. There's a few things there. Okay. First of all, each new moon is in a different sign. Each new moon throughout the year, the new moon will move through the signs sequentially through the year. So we just had a new moon in Taurus.
Okay.
Next new moon will be in Gemini. The next one will be in Cancer. Next one will be in Leo. So what you notice is that the new moon is always in the sign that the sun is in. So this makes sense, right? Because the new moon is actually when the moon comes into conjunction with the sun. So you'll always know what sign the new moon is. There's sometimes an exception to this, but 95% of the time when we're working with the new moon, we know what sign she's in because she's in the same sign that the sun is in. So we know it's Taurus season right now. So our last new moon was in Taurus. We're going to move into late May and June. We'll be in Gemini season, new moon in Gemini, sun and moon talking together. So we want to set our intentions or ask for what's intended for us around the energies that that sign carries and the ruling planet of that sign. And if you work through this over the course of 1 year, it also works on an annual basis of taking you through that whole developmental cycle of the zodiac. So if you do your lunar work with your new moons every month for a year, it will take you through each aspect of your life, and you'll be able to have new beginnings, set intentions for yourself, and sink into what the universe wants for you in each of those 12 archetypal areas of life, which is really a beautiful path to follow. And you can begin to see the elegance of that lunar system. Mm-hmm. So this next one is in the early degrees of Gemini, 2 degrees of Gemini for those that are interested. And that's on May 22nd. It's kind of cool. There's all those 2s and 22s, and we're in 2020. So those of you, I don't work a lot with numerology, but I always notice. And those of you that do will be able to use that extra. You can always use that. And so every year, the new moon in Gemini has those Gemini qualities. But then we can dial it in more because each year it's a little bit different because of the other planets in the living sky. But Gemini is an air sign. Gemini is ruled by Mercury. So this new moon in Gemini is a great time to set intentions and ask for what's being conceived around your habits of mind, your ways of thinking. If there are neural pathways that you're ready to restructure, use that Gemini energy to help you to do that. Gemini is communication, so we can set intentions about that. Curiosity, learning, and research, and clarity of mind, so important right now. We can set intentions about that or ask to receive wisdom about that. So you can see how even with just a few keywords about the sign, you can really dial in your personal work for the month. Yeah.
Can you give an example like that you're going to be doing for this Gemini new moon, or
really good question.
One of another client, or help me with one? You know me well enough. What do I need to do?
Well, I would just say for all of us, like there are a few things that we could seize with this new moon. And let me just say a couple of things about the particular nature of this new moon in May, on May 22nd, because I think it's a really beautiful opportunity. Because of the other planets in the sky, there's a beautiful opportunity to begin to strategically rebuild the let me say, the connective tissue of our lives. I was thinking about how we have this beautiful opportunity with this new moon to rebuild our yin structures. And I was thinking about yin yoga and how it addresses those underlying connective tissues. So if we think about releasing the muscle, the drive, and thinking about those underlying, more feminine, if you will, structures of our lives, we really have a lot of planetary energy that's going to support that. So I would love everybody to think about if there's a way of thinking or an old pattern of thought that is really driven, that you would like to release yourself from and begin something new that's a more gentle way of thinking, a more gentle way of building patterns in your life. This moon is the time to do it. So say you have suffered from having a really harsh inner critic, and you just have this repetitive pattern of mind that's telling you whatever it's telling you, you know, you're not good enough, you have to try harder, you have to do more. You can ask to release that and to replace it with a more self-nurturing habit of mind. This Gemini, Mercury, neural pathways, it's a beautiful opportunity to rewire the mind and use all of your other tools to help you do that. But if I was to suggest one thing that's going to be a good fit for everybody on this moon, it would be that kind of softening into the more yin connective structures of your mind and life, and releasing those more harsh, repetitive, old patterns that aren't working for you anymore. If you want to learn something new, these are like simple Gemini intentions to set. If you marketing, there's another beautiful Gemini thing. So say you've started a new business, a side hustle as we're sitting in our homes. This is a great time to begin telling people about it. You will find that your voice is more golden. So any intentions that you have around rewriting your old habits, especially to bring more softness and yin power to those inner structures. Anything that you want to begin as far as bringing your voice out into the world in a beautiful, nurturing way, you know, write the first line of that book on the new moon, or buy the domain name of the website that you want to set up. These are all Gemini things. And taking that first symbolic act is a good thing to do on the new moon too. So there's lots of ways to bring it in specifically to your life. If you just think about this realm of neural pathways and habits, learning and teaching, communicating with the world, marketing, using your voice. And if you think about how can I do all of those things in a more self-nurturing, deeply connected, feminine, and by feminine, I really mean yin, that concept of the deep power of the receptive, and not anything to do with our cultural ideas about gender. A gentle, nurturing, but extremely powerful way of facing life. So the call is to shift patterns and act out of deep compassion. That's really the call of this moon, shifting those inner patterns.
When you say that, I think about what the last couple months have felt like for me, is that almost like everything's been kind of thrown up, you know, into, and then it's just maybe even sort of starting to feel like it's starting to find its new rhythm or its new pattern. But this state of being kind of really in a scrambled mind, even confused, you know, and while it's been very uncomfortable, at least I'll say for myself, I think for most people, it also kind of sets the stage for this, like, okay, you know, this whole kind of new way of doing things can almost come easier out of that, other than if we were just still stuck in our old ways, or those old pathways. Kind of like the universe is conspiring to help us move
Isn't
into
it beautiful?
this. Yeah.
All the work that we've gone through over the last few months, or it's not even work, like it hasn't even felt like inner work. It has just felt like this, like you were saying, this, everything's been thrown up in the air, and now we're coming into a time where we're just beginning to sort through the pieces. And as we're recording this, of course, we're a couple weeks ahead of when you all will be hearing it. And I think even by the time this airs, people will be feeling more clarity, more mental clarity, and really ready for that new beginning around our habits of mind. So, and not to say that we're out of the woodwork with outward world occurrences, but a sense of inner clarity. And I love how you say that, Megan, of how we really are shifting into a new way of being. And it is uncomfortable. I think that's something to honor about the new moon energy, is there's a rawness and vulnerability whenever we begin completely anew. And we're all feeling that so strongly. But the call is really towards more compassion, more of that lunar consciousness rather than the solar, compassion rather than ego. And this new moon is perfectly suited to help us to get there after everything that we've been through. And there is such an elegance to that, isn't there? With the way things seem to just, the right lessons, the right planetary lessons elegantly emerge just as we've completed the last one.
Yeah, beautiful. So are there any other like kind of concepts or practices that you want us to, at 12:38 Central Time and for the next 2 days after, to really kind of anchor into?
Yeah. So can I suggest a simple new moon ceremony, which is the one that I do every month? And I am a great proponent of what I call kitchen magic, right? It doesn't have to be a big ceremonial. If you love the big ceremonial stuff, then by all means go for it. But I think sometimes we get put off doing these simple rituals for ourselves because we think we have to have the right stuff or we have to take a bunch of time. And I would much rather see everybody doing a really simple, heartfelt new moon ritual than having all the right crystals or whatnot, whatever you think it is that you need. So I would suggest that everyone take some time, anytime after that 12:38 p.m. on May 22nd for the next couple of days. Try to get some privacy. I know privacy in your home is at a premium right now, but try to carve out 10 or 15 minutes where you can just be in a private space where nobody's going to be like, "What are you doing, Mom?" Where you can just feel comfortable to just sit. Have a journal with you. Create a quiet, beautiful space in whatever way you do for yourself, playing some quiet music or lighting incense or diffusing some essential oils, just naturally what feels good to you, and maybe in your meditation space. And then you can create the simplest of altars. And I like to do this on a little tray or a plate so you can bring it around the house, a new moon altar. In many traditions, we create ceremony by calling upon 4 directions or 4 elements, and a 5th one being center. So this is in the Celtic tradition. It's in, just so almost every world tradition has a way of creating ceremony that has certain elements. And we can do this very simply ourselves by thinking about earth, air, fire, water, and spirit, and bringing a simple representation, physical representation of each of those things into our space. Again, I don't want you to go online and start ordering stuff from Amazon now. You don't need to. A little stone that you have on your windowsill that you picked up on the beach for earth. Your favorite beautiful little dish of water, a feather that fell at your feet for air. And it can be anything that reminds you of air. You don't have to follow my directions. And a little candle for fire. Place them on the tray with intention, thinking about what is the fire within me? What does air mean to me? When do I feel grounded in the earth? When do I feel soothed by water? You don't have to know all the right things. Just connect with that element in your own way and make yourself aware of it. And then light a little candle in center. You might want a flower in the center. You just have a beautiful little tray. You can go on my Instagram, moon.wisdom, and I always post my moon altar. So just little pretty things in a tray so you can get an idea. And then once you've set that up, you're in your sacred space. And sit with your journal with that question, what is being conceived? And just allow yourself to free write for a while. And if you want to add in the goal setting, you can say, these are my 3 goals or intentions for this Gemini moon. Write them down. Try to match them with the Gemini stuff, but if that doesn't work for you, you can leave that behind too. Seal them up in an envelope and put them away. You can put them away for a month, you can put them away for 9 months. And maybe the next time we talk on the next new moon activation, I can talk to people about that longer cycle, because there's a longer 2.5-year cycle too, but it's too much to get into today.
Yeah.
But that's a simple kitchen magic new moon ritual that I try to do every month. Also on my Instagram, I walk you through that. If you come and hang out with me on the new moon on Instagram, I'll do a little 10-minute live and we'll build an altar together. So we can do that too. Or you can just follow those, your own version of those directions and do that. Literally, sometimes I do it in 5 minutes. I'm like, okay, you know, it's almost the end of the 2.5 days. I need to do my new moon ritual. And it has had a profound impact in my life. Let me say that both in building the life that I want to have in a very ego-based, strategic way, and in surrendering to what is intended for me. Yeah. So it sounds like a simple practice. It's actually a profound practice of connecting with what the universe wants for you, and then connecting with your ability to make it happen.
Yeah.
Really profound.
I love all of that. And I think the idea of, you know, doing less more often, when I say less, I mean, we don't have to go off on a big retreat and get our, you know, full dose of spiritual practice and development over a, you know, intense period of time, but to mark, you know, especially in yoga or in the Vedic tradition, they would talk about the sattvic times of day, which is morning and evening, or when we have twilight, dusk and dawn, because the energy is just more, it's coming together. And in that time, when we have the yin and the yang energy, or the lunar and solar kind of meeting each other,
yes,
we can meet ourselves more easily then. Beautiful. You know, so like just finding those few moments in the morning or in the evening is, I think, much more powerful than a full-on retreat in Bali. Although I'd take one of those right now.
Yeah, exactly. Sign me up.
Yeah. Well, Bronwyn, will you share with everyone how they can get in connection with you?
Yes.
Through social media type things too, but also about the work that you do in terms of working with people around what their natal birth chart is, and then the touch-ins that people can do with you throughout time. So.
Yeah. So that's what I do. I meet with people in this space every day. Well, not every day, but this is my job. So come see me in this consultation space. We will look at how the energies are flowing for you. So we'll look at your natal chart, who you are, the soul imprint that you came in with. And then we'll look at the conversation the living sky is having with that soul imprint to give you a forecast of how to best use the energies, what the climate's looking like just ahead. And again, you know, sinking into what is deeply intended for you. Yeah. That's what I do. Come see me. You can visit my website, bronwynsimons.com. I'm sure Megan will give you a link. I also teach and offer webinars really regularly. There's a webinar series happening right now in May on the divine feminine in astrology that I'm really excited about. And
when does that start in May?
So by the time this airs, you will be able to purchase recordings of the first two and attend the last one live. So it's 3 Sundays, the 3 last Sundays in May. But I do a webinar series every month. And I'm launching a new Lunar Wisdom membership this month. So by the time you hear this, you'll be able to look at that too. So there's lots of offerings. I have lots of free resources for people. You can go to the links, many different ways to connect with me. Instagram, come see me for a consult, come to one of my webinars, my monthly free full moon circle. There's lots of stuff, and I would love to connect with each of you. And Megan will give you the links, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I'm just delighted about beginning this new series with you all at Perennial. And I want to really thank you, Megan, for this opportunity to share with your beautiful community at Perennial. And I think it's I'm just really happy to be here, and look forward to next month with the moon in Cancer.
Yeah, me too. And what should we wait till we get there, or is there anything that we should just kind of keep back here about that moon?
I think we should live that Gemini moon through this
Okay.
Gemini cycle and take things as the universe doles them out to us.
Oh
And
yeah, that's what we're supposed to practice. Bronwyn, thank you so much.
thank you. This has been just a delight.
I know I could do this for hours,
Right?
but I'm so appreciative of the time we had with you today. And we'll see you again next month.
Okay, thank you so much.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Okay.